Calm before the storm. In the bitter winter of 1461, England stood on the precipice of chaos. The Wars of the Roses raged across the land, a bloody struggle for power between the houses of Lancaster and York. In the tranquil village of Towton, nestled amidst the frost-covered fields of Yorkshire, an eerie calm settled over the landscape.
The villagers went about their daily routines, oblivious to the impending storm of violence that loomed on the horizon. Children played in the snow, their laughter echoing through the narrow streets, while farmers tended to their livestock and merchants bartered their wares in the market square.
But beneath the facade of normalcy, tension simmered. For Towton was situated at the heart of a bitter feud that had torn the fabric of English society asunder. The Lancastrian King Henry VI, plagued by bouts of madness, clung desperately to his tenuous grip on the throne, while the Yorkist claimant, Edward IV, harbored dreams of seizing power for himself. In the halls of power, nobles whispered conspiracies and plotted their next move, while knights and men-at-arms sharpened their swords and polished their armor in anticipation of the coming conflict. Rumors of impending battle hung heavy in the air, casting a pall of unease over the land. Yet, amidst the uncertainty and fear, life in Towton continued unabated. Families gathered around hearths to share warmth and stories, finding solace in each other's company amid the chill of winter. In the local tavern, the ale flowed freely, and bards regaled patrons with tales of valor and heroism, temporarily banishing the specter of war from their minds. But, as the days grew shorter and the nights grew colder, the tranquility of Towton began to unravel. Scouts brought grim tidings of approaching armies, their banners fluttering defiantly in the wind. The calm before the storm was drawing to a close, and the fate of England hung in the balance. As the first flakes of snow began to fall, casting a mantle of white over the land, the people of Towton braced themselves for the inevitable clash of steel and bloodshed that would soon engulf their village. The calm was shattered, replaced by the ominous drumbeat of war echoing in the distance. The Battle of Towton was on the horizon, and with it, the promise of Britain's bloodiest confrontation. Rival claims, the bitter conflict that would culminate in the blood-soaked fields of Towton in 1461, had its roots in the rival claims to the English throne. Two noble houses, Lancaster and York, stood as bitter adversaries, each asserting its right to rule over England. However, the Lancastrian grip on power had become increasingly tenuous under the reign of Henry VI, plagued by bouts of mental instability. The king struggled to assert his authority, leaving the realm vulnerable to the machinations of ambitious nobles. Opposing the Lancastrian claim was the House of York, represented by the White Rose, and championed by the charismatic Edward IV, descended from a cadet branch of the Plantagenets. The Yorkists argued that their claim to the throne was superior to that of the Lancastrians, based on their descent from Edward III through the male line. Edward IV, a formidable warrior and skilled tactician, had garnered widespread support among the nobility, who viewed him as a strong and capable leader capable of restoring stability to the realm. With the backing of powerful allies, including the influential Earl of Warwick, Edward set his sights on the throne, determined to wrest it from the faltering grasp of the Lancastrians. As tension simmered and rival factions vied for supremacy, the stage was set for a decisive confrontation that would determine the fate of England. The Battle of Towton would serve as the crucible in which the rival claims of Lancaster and York would be tested in the fires of war, and the course of English history would be forever altered. The Yorkist advance, in the bleak winter of 1461, as snow blanketed the countryside and icy winds whipped across the landscape, the Yorkist forces under the command of Edward IV marched inexorably towards Towton. With banners flying high and swords gleaming in the pale winter light, they advanced with grim determination, their eyes fixed on the prize that lay within their grasp, the English throne. Edward IV, a young king with a fierce ambition, had assembled a formidable army comprised of seasoned knights, loyal retainers, and battle-hardened mercenaries. Backed by powerful allies such as the Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker for his ability to sway the course of events, Edward had marshaled his forces for a decisive strike against the Lancastrians. As they trudged through the snow-covered countryside, the Yorkist soldiers braved the elements with stoic resolve, their hearts filled with anticipation and a burning desire for victory. For many among them, the Battle of Towton represented not only a chance to secure their king's claim to the throne, but also an opportunity to win glory and renown on the field of battle. Despite the harsh conditions and the arduousness of the journey, morale remained high among the Yorkist ranks, fueled by the fervent belief in their cause and the righteousness of their struggle. They were driven by a shared sense of purpose, united in their determination to overthrow the Lancastrian usurpers and restore order to a kingdom ravaged by civil strife. As they drew ever closer to Towton, the Yorkist commanders finalized their battle plans, meticulously coordinating their movements and preparing their troops for the coming conflict. The fate of England hung in the balance, and the Yorkists knew that they could ill afford to falter in their quest for victory. With each step bringing them closer to their destiny, the Yorkist army pressed on, their spirits undaunted by the trials that lay ahead. The Battle of Towton loomed on the horizon, a crucible in which the fate of a nation would be decided, and the Yorkists stood ready to meet their destiny with courage and resolve. Lancastrian defenses. As the Yorkist forces advanced towards Towton, the Lancastrians prepared to meet them with grim determination. Led by experienced commanders such as Henry Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, and Henry Percy, Earl of Northumberland, the Lancastrian army had fortified their position in anticipation of the coming onslaught. Towton, a small village nestled amidst the rolling hills of Yorkshire, provided a natural defensive advantage for the Lancastrians. They positioned their forces strategically, taking full advantage of the terrain to create formidable obstacles for the approaching enemy. The Lancastrian commanders ordered the construction of barricades and earthworks, fortifying their position with sharpened stakes and makeshift barriers to impede the advance of the Yorkist army. Archers were stationed behind defensive walls, their bows at the ready to rain death upon any who dared to approach too closely. Henry Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, known as the Red Duke for his fiery temperament, rallied his men with impassioned speeches, exhorting them to stand firm against the Yorkist onslaught and defend their rightful king to the last. His leadership inspired confidence among the Lancastrian ranks, instilling in them a sense of unity and purpose as they prepared to face the enemy. Yet, despite their resolve, the Lancastrians knew that they faced a formidable foe in the Yorkists. Edward IV's army was larger and better equipped, and their commander was a seasoned warrior with a reputation for tactical brilliance. The Lancastrians braced themselves for a fierce and bloody struggle, knowing that their survival depended on their ability to withstand the onslaught that was sure to come. As the Yorkist army drew near, the Lancastrians stood ready to defend their position with their lives, determined to repel the invaders and preserve the Lancastrian dynasty against all odds. The stage was set for a showdown of epic proportions, and the fate of England hung in the balance. The two sides prepared to clash in a battle that would go down in history as one of the bloodiest ever fought on British soil. The eve of battle. On the eve of the Battle of Towton, a palpable tension hung in the frigid air, as both the Lancastrian and Yorkist forces braced themselves for the impending clash. In the encampments that sprawled across the snow-covered fields surrounding Towton, soldiers prepared themselves mentally and physically for the trials that lay ahead. Within the Lancastrian camp, the flickering glow of campfires cast dancing shadows upon the faces of weary men as they sharpened their swords and polished their armor. Henry Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, moved among his troops, offering words of encouragement and rallying them to the cause. Despite the bitter cold and the uncertainty of the coming battle, there was a steely resolve in the eyes of the Lancastrian soldiers as they prepared to defend their king and their honor to the last. Across the battlefield, within the Yorkist encampment, a sense of anticipation crackled in the air as Edward IV and his commanders finalized their battle plans. The king's tent served as the focal point of activity, as strategists and advisors huddled together to discuss tactics and contingencies. Edward himself exuded an aura of confidence and determination, his eyes ablaze with the fire of ambition as he contemplated the prospect of victory on the morrow. Throughout the night, the sound of prayers and hymns drifted through the frosty air, as soldiers on both sides sought solace in faith and sought divine favor for the coming battle. Amidst the solemnity, there were moments of camaraderie and levity, as men shared stories and laughter in a fleeting respite from the grim reality of war. But as the hours passed and the first light of dawn began to creep across the horizon, the mood grew somber once more, as the realization dawned that the time for talk and preparation was at an end. The Battle of Towton awaited, and with it, the promise of glory, honor, and, for many, the specter of death. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the darkness, illuminating the snow-covered landscape with an ethereal glow, the Lancastrian and Yorkist armies stirred from their encampments, steeling themselves for the ordeal that awaited them. The eve of battle had come to an end, and the fate of England hung in the balance. The two sides prepared to meet in a clash that would echo through the annals of history for centuries to come. A fateful dawn. As dawn broke on March 29, 1461, the two armies faced each other across the blood-soaked fields of Towton, ready to settle the fate of England through combat. The battle begins. With the blast of trumpets, the battle commenced. Yorkist longbowmen unleashed a storm of arrows upon the Lancastrian ranks, while foot soldiers and cavalry charged into the fray. Brutal warfare. The battle devolved into a brutal melee, with swords clashing and men falling on both sides. The snow turned crimson as the casualties mounted, and the cries of the wounded echoed across the battlefield. The Lancastrian stand. Despite being outnumbered, the Lancastrians fought fiercely, refusing to yield an inch of ground to the Yorkist onslaught. Led by experienced commanders, they held their position with grim determination. Yorkists break through. As the day wore on, the Yorkists gradually gained the upper hand, exploiting weaknesses in the Lancastrian defenses and pressing their advantage with relentless ferocity. The turning point. Despite their resilience, the Lancastrians began to falter under the relentless pressure of the Yorkist advance. With their lines wavering, victory seemed within Edward IV's grasp. The flight of the Lancastrians. As dusk approached, the Lancastrian army, battered and broken, finally began to crumble. Facing defeat, Henry VI's commanders ordered a desperate retreat, hoping to salvage what remained of their forces. The toll of victory. The fields of Towton were strewn with the dead and dying, a grim testament to the savagery of the battle. Victory had come at a terrible cost, with thousands of men slain in the snow. Edward's triumph. For Edward IV, the Battle of Towton marked a decisive triumph, securing his claim to the throne and establishing the Yorkist dynasty as the dominant power in England. Legacy of bloodshed. Yet, the scars of Towton would endure for generations, haunting the collective memory of the English people and serving as a grim reminder of the horrors of civil war. Aftermath. In the aftermath of the battle, Edward IV consolidated his power, but the wounds of the Wars of the Roses would continue to fester, leading to further conflict and instability in the years to come. Towton Chapel. A chapel was later erected on the battlefield as a memorial to the fallen, a solemn reminder of the sacrifices made in the pursuit of power and glory. The Wars of the Roses. The Wars of the Roses would drag on for decades, plunging England into a state of turmoil and uncertainty, as rival factions vied for control of the throne and the destiny of the nation hung in the balance. Towton, 1461. Britain's bloodiest battle. On the cold and fateful morning of March 29, 1461, the fields of Towton bore witness to a spectacle of unprecedented carnage as the Lancastrian and Yorkist armies clashed in a titanic struggle for supremacy. The stage was set for what would go down in history as Britain's bloodiest battle, a harrowing ordeal that would leave an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of the nation. As the first light of dawn bathed the snow-covered landscape in an ethereal glow, the two armies arrayed themselves for battle, their ranks stretching across the horizon as far as the eye could see. Banners fluttered defiantly in the brisk morning breeze, emblazoned with the red rose of Lancaster and the White Rose of York, symbols of the rival factions that had plunged England into turmoil. With the blast of trumpets and the thunder of drums, the battle commenced in earnest, as arrows darkened the sky and the earth shook beneath the thunderous charge of cavalry. Swords clashed and shields splintered as men fought tooth and nail for every inch of ground, their cries of rage and anguish drowned out by the cacophony of war. The snow quickly turned crimson as the blood of thousands stained the frozen earth, mingling with the tears of the fallen and the sweat of the living. Amidst the chaos and confusion, individual acts of heroism and valor shone brightly, as brave men on both sides distinguished themselves through acts of selflessness and sacrifice. Hour after hour, the battle raged on, with neither side willing to yield an inch in their quest for victory. The Lancastrians, bolstered by their fierce determination and their unwavering loyalty to their king, fought with a ferocity born of desperation, while the Yorkists, inspired by their charismatic leader and their hunger for glory, pressed their advantage with relentless tenacity. As the sun reached its zenith and began its slow descent towards the western horizon, the tide of battle began to turn decisively in favor of the Yorkists. The Lancastrian lines wavered and buckled under the relentless pressure of their adversaries, their ranks decimated by the ferocity of the onslaught. In the end, victory belonged to the Yorkists as the Lancastrian army crumbled before their relentless advance. The fields of Towton were littered with the broken bodies of the fallen, a grim testament to the savagery of war and the price of ambition. As dusk descended upon the blood-soaked battlefield, the surviving Lancastrian forces, battered and broken, beat a hasty retreat, their hopes of victory dashed upon the altar of history. The Battle of Towton was over, but its legacy would endure for generations to come, a haunting reminder of the fragility of power and the cost of conflict in a nation torn asunder by civil war.